Democrats can absolutely win, even in the face of this flood of money from the right and every horrific tactic that the right wants to use.
Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Hello Merge Tag, a podcast about social media, politics, and where they intersect. We check in with candidates, consultants, strategists, and more to find out what's working and what's not in the political digital world. I'm your host, Josh Clemens of Reverbal Communications. We help progressive campaigns and organizations win the internet. Have questions you want answered on the pod? Have a guest or topic recommendation? Just want to say hey? Drop us a line at hello@reverbalcommunications.com. Find all episodes at hellomergetag.com or wherever you stream podcasts. Now let's dive in. Look out, Facebook. Now you can drive website visits directly from Civic Shout. Introducing Express CPC, Civic Shout's new cost-per-click ad system. Everyone already knows that Civic Shout's the best way to grow your opt-in email list. Folks like M&R, Greenpeace, and Feeding America stand by it. So can you. Grow your list and run traffic campaigns that hit so hard, your team will wonder how you did it. Environmental Action called Civic Shout a wildly better way to grow your email list. And Clarify Agency saw a 200% return on ad spend in just 2 months. Civic Shout, the ad platform for progressive causes. Head to civicshout.com/partners to learn more. That's civicshout.com/partners. Y'all know Ben Wikler. He's currently the head of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, a role he's held since 2019. Here's a quick relevant fact for you. I live in Wisconsin, and I do a lot of work in Wisconsin politics. Back in 2018, I was hired by WisDems to help train their comms team on digital because at the time, they literally didn't have a single digital staffer. Ben came in shortly thereafter, and let's just say things changed real quick. Before leading WisDems, Ben served as the Washington, D.C. director and senior advisor for MoveOn. One of my favorite parts of his very long and impressive bio, as a student, he was recruited by Franken to help write Lies and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them, a book that absolutely needs a second edition. Ben's done a lot of cool things to push the Democratic Party forward in innovative and important ways, but now his tenure as chair is coming to an end. I invited him on the pod to reflect on what he's learned and what others can take away from the powerhouse digital program he helped build here in Wisconsin. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. We're, neighbors-ish and a big fan of your work. You're stepping down after one hell of a run. What's going through your head as this chapter closes? How you feeling?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, and thanks for everything you do to move our space forward into the, we're now like a quarter into the 21st century, and I feel like lots of, as William Gibson said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, and you're helping distribute it more widely across the democratic ecosystem. So I'm grateful for that.
I appreciate that.
I feel first a lot of gratitude. There are literally thousands of people who have made it their job to fight for our democracy, to fight for a better future in Wisconsin, to fight to unrig a state that was basically enchained by the Walker administration starting in 2011. And step by step, we have made massive, massive progress in turning Wisconsin into a democracy. So both to our team, to our volunteers across the state, to everyone who's chipped in or reshared something or knocked on a door, I feel just intense gratitude. And the second thing I feel is fury at the administration, which is, we fought so hard to prevent Trump from winning, and we came the closest of any of the states that Trump won to defeating him. But now, it is a flaming, rolling catastrophe at the national level. And I'm, every day you have to decide how much news to consume about what is happening in our federal government that is hitting every state, every city, every community. That's the second thing I feel. And then the third thing is a lot of hope, because we are actually, at the same time as all these terrible things are happening, there's a growing backlash, and there's a real reckoning happening within the Democratic Party. There's a lot of people thinking really hard about how to make sure that we win more effectively. And, we kind of need that renewal, and we need to get ready to fight in different ways and harder and more effectively. And what we saw this spring in the Supreme Court race is that Democrats can absolutely win, even in the face of this flood of money from the right and every horrific tactic that the right wants to use. So I think there's a real chance Wisconsin gets a blue trifecta in 2026. All the statewide plus both chambers of the legislature, flips congressional seats, a House majority. I don't think it's crazy to talk about the fight for a Senate majority. I think there's going to be Senate races that are in places that have been really tough for Democrats to win that we have a real shot in. So I think we should be going big at this moment. And that the feeling that might really be possible makes me fired up.
Gratitude, fury, and hope feel like three very appropriate feelings for this moment. So I love it. You started a Substack recently. Where else are you finding value online these days? And who or what are you reading to kind of, you said it's hard to know how much to consume, which is exactly how I feel too. I can live in the news and be like destroyed by it, or I can like decide that I'm going to like try to spend time like building things and doing things. And it's hard to know where the line is because you can't tap out, but you also can't live in it. So yeah, like how are you like, how are you finding that balance to stay sane and informed at the same time?
It is always an evolving mix. I think that we're in a golden age right now of individual creators and voices being able to find audiences and find ways to bypass every possible filter. I watch very little like actual TV, but I read Substacks and non-Substack like things. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Those are probably the biggest. I still read the New York Times, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the Cap Times, Wisconsin State Journal, the kind of like online editions of different newspapers, which are still, and WisPolitics. Those are all big sources of, and Recombobulation Area is a great Substack about Wisconsin politics, which I recommend everyone.
Love it. For sure. We're a friend of the Recombob for sure here.
Yep. I like look at some vertical video, but I don't live in it. I'm not addicted, and I sort of alternate between deleting and reinstalling TikTok itself and looking at reels and so forth. Often it's more to like get a sense of what is going on the medium than it is to get a sense of what's going on in the world. I spend much too much time on both X and Blue Sky, and it is fascinating how they've become totally disjoint. Like Twitter used to be the actual global town square. Now it is a right-wing echo chamber, but there's also a lot of interesting like scientists and AI researchers and some amount of like political accounts and government accounts and journalists. But like it's mostly you get a real sense of what Elon Musk wants the algorithm to push there, and so which has a lot to do with what happens in the world now. So it still has addictive properties and it's still really interesting. I'm of the belief that it is important to communicate all over the place. So like, even though it is mostly hostile territory, I think it's good for Democrats to keep posting on places where they might be able to persuade someone or reduce someone's enthusiasm for terrible stuff. And then Blue Sky is like really, it's amazing when it was named, it was not intended to refer to the Blue Democratic Party, because it is like very much the distilled
for sure
kind of resistance Twitter moved on to a new platform. I still post on Threads, but I don't really read a lot on Threads.
I barely even post there. Like I totally hear it. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter still, but Threads. I don't know. I never found much there.
I now do write to post on Blue Sky X and Threads, and on Substack Notes, which has a really high engagement level, even though it doesn't have that many people on it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I agree.
Yeah, it's like a really kind of like the hyper-informed tale of the old Twitter user base. It is really for junkies. And then also do video on Reels and on TikTok and sometimes on Substack video. And I need to get myself to start posting on Facebook again, because there's still a lot of voters there, even though it's not like where the political conversation happens. Yeah, older voters, but it's right. Whenever I go on Facebook, I'm like, look at all these people I know who clearly have been here regularly recently. And I think Democrats probably ignore normie Facebook world at their peril. I think it's actually still a place that's worth communicating.
When I work with candidates, I post on Facebook every day for myself, almost never. But yeah, I absolutely I still lean heavily into Facebook. Even though for me, it's like other than some groups I'm in, it's very hard to get much value there, but there's still a lot of voters there. And I think Democrats definitely can still find people there, but it's harder. You've become sort of the political king of the Twitter thread. I'm going to deem you that. I don't know if anybody else has. Should more Twitter in particular, Twitter, obviously, I think the point you made, it's an interesting idea. Twitter was such an amazing platform for so long, always problematic. Let's not lie, but it was amazing. I've been on Twitter since the beginning, and there's still this interesting shadow of what it used to be. These scientists and there's interesting things, but it's all just drowning in this cesspool of that's essentially 4chan, brought to life. I guess my question to you, you're still doing these threads, but you have a massive following. Do threads or other does Twitter if you didn't have 250,000 followers, whatever you have, would you still be on Twitter, or would you have walked away, do you think?
I think it's still worth posting. The thing about Twitter is that because it's more like TikTok now, where it is super algorithm driven and most people consume it through the For You page. And what that means is that if you have something that is passing a bunch of algorithmic tests at the beginning, it can blow up even if you don't have any followers. What's striking is that Twitter, like I will post something on both Twitter and Blue Sky, and it will go much more viral on Twitter because Twitter will keep putting it into people's timelines just because it gets a high level of engagement, whereas Blue Sky is much more, people spend more time just on feeds on Blue Sky that are just like chronological who they're following.
Sure.
And so for that reason, I think that if you have interesting content, you should put it on X. Like you should go there. You should really understand the algorithm. Don't put a link in your first tweet. Like images help, like short things that then promise something more interesting later and open a curiosity gap. Those are all really helpful on Twitter. But like I see regularly, you see like hyper viral threads from people that don't have big followings because the algorithm does really reward velocity. And so I think I do recommend it to people. And I think like, if you're launching a campaign, if you're making a new point, if you're doing like, and by a campaign, I mean like a candidate or a marketing campaign or like some kind of activist campaign, like it's not like you'll hit gold every time, but there are outsized rewards to like hitting the moment perfectly there. I will say that one thing that has been striking to me is how much I assume that this is algorithmic because I think that partly it's due to the kind of people who would follow me have left Twitter, but I think it's an algorithmic thing as well that basically Elon Musk assuming control, my follower growth on Twitter stalled out. And I now have many more followers on Blue Sky, even though I've been active there much less. And I think I get fewer impressions on Blue Sky, but like I think the like recommended posting, recommended follow accounts, all that kind of stuff deprioritized progressive accounts. And as far as I can tell, this is, unless you're like Dye Workwear or like, one of the Elon Musk's favorite.
Love Dye Workwear.
Love Dye Workwear. But there's a handful of like accounts that just, I think, get broad engagement in the way that Musk wants. They get a ton of juice, but it's much harder to actually grow following on Twitter than it used to be. And Blue Sky is a much more fertile ground to build a large audience. And on a percentage basis, I'm growing fastest on Substack.
Oh, interesting. So if you were like, let's say you go into consulting after this, whatever, if a campaign came to you, like a large campaign said, we're only going to invest in 1 or 2 channels, like would Twitter be on the list, or would you say focus on Blue Sky, or you're just like, no, do it all?
Well, I think the question is like the return on investment calculation and what your goals are. So if you're trying to reach voters, then like Twitter's in your Democratic campaign, it's just not actually very helpful. But it is still a powerful tool for reaching journalists and shaping opinion because a lot of journalists still post there for whatever reason. And like
it's that shadow, like they just can't log. I mean, like me too. Like I still log on to Twitter like several times a day, even though I hate it myself every time I do.
Absolutely. That's it. Yeah. And so like if part of there's like a campaign, there's the shadow primary. It happens before the real primary, which is like when people kind of get a sense of who's a for real candidate. Like if you're not part of the conversation there, then you're maybe missing out on a bunch of people who could be really helpful to you. I think like I wouldn't buy ads on Twitter. That seems like incredibly bad. Like we're trying to I think you want to like your activists, your volunteers, a bunch of them are probably on Blue Sky, and you should post there with like cognizant that's kind of your core audience. It's also a place where you could get ratioed if you like say something that people don't really like. You get ratioed from the right. I've gone viral on the right on Twitter like multiple times in the last year, and it's fascinating. It's a thing that didn't really used to happen, but like now it's like a feeding frenzy. There was a moment when Trump announced the tariffs, and I tweeted, "Trump has a clear position on the economy. He's against it," and that like got like regular pickup. But then Trump like later that day, like the next day, backed off on a few of the tariffs. And suddenly there was this avalanche on the right of like, this didn't age well. This aged like milk on a hot day, like da-da-da-da-da. And it was like some right-wing account had picked it up and then like got this kind of thing. So it got like, I think millions of impressions from this incredibly stupid, like he's still messing up the economy disastrously.
Yeah, he backed down because his people were pissed, not because he realized he made a mistake. Yeah, exactly.
But it was an interesting thing that I think was much less likely to have happened in the pre-Musk days, because like catnip for conservatives didn't used to be like the thing that the algorithm was optimized for in the same way. Conflict, like other stuff like that. But now it's just like if right-wing blue checks like it, then it's gonna like become a massive hit on Twitter. And some
I
of
mean, the conservative movement has a problem because a huge part of why they were on Twitter was to dunk on liberals, and the less liberals that are there, the harder it is. So like, I do think like they are not going to enjoy this platform as much either, as it like, they don't want an echo chamber. They want a place to fight. And like, the more of us like that sort of walk away, the harder it is for them to do that, which is why I think we're seeing more conservatives come to places like Notes and to Blue Sky, which started as like more liberal spaces. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch what the platform looks like in 2 years as like more and more folks just sort of, I don't know. We'll see. As long as Die Workwear is still tweeting, I will still be logging in occasionally because that guy is a beast. But we'll see.
Other thing I'd say on this is I often think of the maxim from Upworthy from Peter Kegley and Eli Pariser. They had the Ariel strategy, Ariel the mermaid from The Little Mermaid, which was I want to be where the people are. If you remember that from the song.
Oh, sure.
And I think you want to go where the people are. So like, and now they're fragmented. They're in a lot of different places. I think it's good to post everywhere. The cost of making content is much lower. I mean, it's higher than the cost of posting it on a variety of platforms. Right. So I think like it is good to make one's post, whatever the phrase is, post many times.
Cross post,
Cross post, and like you want to like you have to tweak what the handle is. There's like it's like a tiny bit of work, but it's very much less. Like I think that it probably is not worth having a hyper tailored voice for every different platform, especially given that like people can see your stuff across multiple platforms. Like you should ever be like have a different view of the world in different places. But I do think that it's worth being present in a bunch of different places, and also tracking where people shift to. Like there was a moment when it seemed like TikTok was going to get shut down and Red Note was exploding, and then it was like, maybe you should make a presence on Red Note for yourself. And now the threat has receded, so to speak. But I think all this stuff, even within platforms, the algorithm evolves so quickly. Like I think you have to like, if you want to win the internet, like you have to just constantly be upping your game. There's no set it and forget it.
Totally agree. And like you were saying, like different voice, but I think a lot of it's like different strategy. There was a time where like you kind of needed a different strategy for each platform, but all the platforms have ripped each other off and melded into this one giant platform with different tools. So it's, which I actually say is a gift, because it's like a lot easier to take one piece of content and put it everywhere. You don't have to have a different strategy for Instagram and Twitter necessarily. I mean, there can be, but you could take a tweet thread and share it on Instagram and a video and share it on Twitter. And like, they can both do really well separately. So I work with a lot of campaigns where it's like, the hard part is creating the content, not creating it for each channel. And then you just have to tweak it and make it work everywhere. So, so in some ways it's a gift, but obviously all in all, I wish we could go back to a simpler world where there's 3 platforms that everybody were that you could like, talk to people, but it is what it is. So I've got some questions for you about WisDems. You've done some phenomenal work there, obviously. As I mentioned, when you first took over that role, and I assume you knew that, WisDems had 0 digital staff when you stepped in 2019.
Well, Chuck had become the digital,
after me, before you. Fair.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
He was not there when I got hired as a consultant because I was working with their whole comms team. So Chuck predated you, but that was it. So it was a one person digital program.
Yep, that's right.
Okay. So y'all obviously built a national model. I mean, nationally folks talk about the WisDems digital program. So what was the first move you made to shift the culture from a one person, trying to do all of digital to actually building out a real digital program?
So personnel is policy in a way, and there's so many different things. Chuck also does the graphic design the graphic design for the party, and the making materials and shooting photos and video, and he had just a lot of different hats to wear. We had consultants that helped run an email program and different things, and great folks, but it wasn't so the first thing was hiring Babak. It was thinking through that we need to approach the stuff in a different way. But I think preceding that, there was a real cultural shift towards I want us to treat people that we interact with on the internet as people, and both increase the velocity and velocity on social media, but in email, it's actually reducing the amount of email a little bit, and switching gears to think of our job as providing a service to people who subscribe to us, that we want to treat them respectfully. We want to give them real information. That the concept that I brought over from MoveOn is that you're really there to equip these incredibly important people who could make or break the future of your organization with information that helps them see how working with you advances their own goals and values in the world. And years ago, we worked at Avaz, which is a global MoveOn, and we had the concept.
sure.
So the way that we would train our staff is that when you send an email, imagine that you were briefing a president or prime minister. You have 30 seconds. You're in an elevator with them on the way to a meeting, and like you need to establish why this conversation is important, what it is that they need to make a decision on, like why they might care, and then if they all that before you put in the first link or first ask. And then if they're interested enough to stay tuned, then you want to quickly equip them with information that can help them decide again, like whether it's the right thing for them. You don't want to fool them into doing something. You don't want to like push them into doing something. Like your job is like, they're really important. They have power. You want to like, if you have something to offer them that they would like to do something about, then they will do that. And having that level of respect for the people that you're interacting with is a way to build trust. And especially if you're an institution that's going to go beyond one particular election, trust is so important. And the goal with the party is that every election, it's to win, but it's also to conduct the election such that win or lose, we come out the other side stronger. And so there's a series of emergencies that happen in politics, but you want to always, you don't want to cry wolf. You don't want to like skies fall when the sky's not falling, so that when the sky is falling, you can say that it is and it's credible. And you also don't want to like do everything as rosy when it's not. Like have like sort of honesty and trust and respect with your people, and that's how you build trust to be in it for the long haul and to be able to like really jump on it when big things are happening. So I remember I came in. There was an idea that had started the year before, I want to say, in the 2018 cycle with Tammy Baldwin's campaign did the Cheddar Bomb, which is like
for sure.
Like a
big fundraise kind of like in a moment kind of thing. Yeah.
So we decided to do something like that. The first innovation that we really made was figuring out how to do fundraising on Twitter, which is now a dead art because Twitter is dead. I
was going to ask, so you're not like, that's like even all your following, all your engagement, like you're not.
We still post fundraising links and it's a few $1,000s a month, but we used to raise like 6 figures a month on Twitter. Wow. And we had this whole network of like, I would write a long thread. We would ask people beforehand, and this is something that I had worked with some folks to do when I was at MoveOn as well, around like amplification of big moments, also some fundraising. So you'd basically ask a bunch of like people with major followings if they'd be up for amplifying when this moment hit. You'd say like, on Monday we're going to launch this thing. Are you up for like helping do it? Mm-hmm. And then and I built like Twitter rooms of people who were friends of Wisconsin, and then we would launch this campaign. We'd launch the Cheddar Bomb, and then we'd like DM everybody and say, okay, like here's the tweet, amplify it, and we'd have just a huge array of like political activists, of movie stars, of just like big Twitter influencer voices. Amplifying, and it would get huge like reach, but also tons of people would contribute. And then even if you couldn't contribute, you could amplify it. And those blew up. And so the first one was in the summer of 2019 when Trump came to Wisconsin, and we used his visit as a hook to be like, let's make his visit to Wisconsin backfire. And that raised us a ton of money. And then we just made it a habit like to try every month to do some kind of like big online like Twitter thread fundraiser. And then it eventually became like routinized as our end of month fundraising thread. And so we'd have a whole like, organizing pattern around it. And then that thread would become the basis for fundraising emails and for like often like donor memos and for like other collateral that we'd build on other places. And often that would then go into what was in our like direct mail that we'd send to people asked to raise money. But it all started with like a writing project that was really thinking hard about like, what would hook people right away and be true and be energizing, and what's the theory of change for like why engaging on this would make a big difference. That led, I think, to like building a bunch of relationships online that made it possible for us to do our big pop culture event series that came later. And so we sort of like built a network of people with big audiences that had a relationship with WisDems because they'd help make those things possible. We did a lot of like
Princess Bride and the West Wing and all that.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, the idea that all came from like starting on like a Twitter thread led to so many of the successes y'all had is a pretty interesting like circle to square or whatever you want to call it. That's pretty cool. I'm curious. I love the way you described the Avaz email program. I know Avaz. I remember them. I studied international peace and conflict resolution in grad school. They were on my radar. So I love that idea. Like you have 30 seconds to talk to a king or a prime minister. What are you going to say to him? Do you think that the general Democratic email program is meeting the moment? Do you have any advice for your colleagues, your friends in the world who are sending emails that might not be worthy of sending to a king or a prime minister? I'd love to hear you like share your thoughts as somebody who has, I mean, you have a very unique perspective, because most principals, like the Tammy Baldwins of the world, every 6 years they are like on the ballot, and then, you know, then they can go back to like doing the work. But you, every couple of months, have another thing that you have to do. So like WisDems, more so than even a Senate race, can't burn the trust. Because if you do, you can't burn the building down in November and expect to win in April. Which I hadn't really thought about the role that like you had in that, of like, you have a greater responsibility to your list even than like Senate and gubernatorial races, because Governor Evers has 4 years to rebuild. You have 4 months. Like, you have to be ready to go. So what have you learned from doing that? Like, in this constant cycle of new elections, having to keep that trust, that you think more Democrats, that you would like to see more Democrats learn from your experience?
It starts with seeing, I mean, this sounds maybe too elementary, but it's seeing people rather than numbers on the other end of the email list.
It sounds elementary, but I think it's not. Like, we see
really
a lot of these programs,
yeah.
think of them as numbers, not people.
Well,
for sure.
So you think, like, you really think of it as like, I think of all fundraising this way, and also organizing this way. I think of fundraising as organizing, I should say.
Okay.
That fundamentally, like, what you're doing is trying to figure out what do people care about, and what do you care about, and where's the common ground, and how do you invite someone to do something that will matter to them based on that certain set of values. Like, that's how you build a coalition of people, a group of people to do anything. And so with an email list, like, what you want is to like make it of value to them to be on your list. They're on your list. Like, you want to give them opportunities to do stuff other than just donate. So we ask people to volunteer. We invite people to our convention. We like send, people, sometimes after every election, I send like a big thank you email that just goes through like a kind of an analysis of what happened. And then everyone who got involved in the race in any way, like, go through all the different parts of the infrastructure. Because I think that's actually like a service to give people a sense of what it took to be able to win. And you think of yourself as serving the audience with something of value to them. And giving people a chance to donate in ways that actually make an impact is a service. Like, that is, as someone who occasionally gives money to candidates myself, like, I want to know when there's a really big thing coming up where my contribution can add up to something that can make a difference in winning. Like, the goal is to, we want to win elections, and we want to make a difference once we do. So I think, like, there's stuff just about, I just hate the kind of like 500% match where it's not a real match and use zeros or what have you.
Zeros instead of yes, O's instead of zeros is
like zeros,
a great sign that you don't respect me.
100%. Now, we actually do sometimes have donors who are like, I'll give you $10,000 if you can match it. And then we will go to our email list and be like, we have an actual match here. Like, we want you to give. Sure. And I kind of like love that. And it's cool, it's a cool thing on both sides. Like, but I think that, like, starting with that kind of like respect of like, would you feel comfortable sending this to a friend? MoveOn's training is always, you should write the email like you're sending it to an actual friend, and you might want to think of who that friend is. I sometimes have used my mom in my brain as the person that I'm sending the email to, and you just want to treat them with respect and not be trying to like manipulate them. And that's the fundamental thing. And it's not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily win. So, email lists, like, people A/B test things. They send 2 different versions of the email to see which one does the best, and they'll go with the one that does the best. But sometimes A/B testing will lead you into a cul-de-sac where you like get, a particular email pops because you haven't done it before and it's different and the sky's falling. But if you keep doing that, then you just burn through the list. And so we look at, like, on the metric side, you look at unsubscribe rates, you look at like we have people read every response to the emails that we get, and like that helps us to, calibrate what people react to. Sure. You want to like, look at all the signals, not just how much money you're raising from the list. And then, like, the best scenario is people are actually forwarding your email to other people, and people are signing up for your email list because of it, because it's such a great email. And I think that's thinking through how to create that kind of experience to me is really valuable, and not selling people a line, and that allows you to sustain. And then the other thing that we built after the 2020 election, at the end of the 2020 election, we really leaned in towards building a recurring donor list, and we did that on social media. We've done that some with email and different things. So we were able, like, we raise more every month through recurring donations than most state parties in the country raise. And that's, makes a huge difference because it means you can keep a year-round staff on board, even when Wisconsin has more elections than almost anyone else. We have an election. So we have 6 elections every 2 years.
Oh, man.
And the longest gap between an election, if you include primaries, is 10 months. And so we're in that period now. This is our dry period. But, right now we're hiring, doing organizing on the ground. We have a community engagement week of action where we're working with hundreds of neighborhood teams to do community service projects right now and build the bonds between people. And, we'll email about that and engage people, and all of that makes it a real part of people's lives to be part of what we're doing. It's not just some thing off in the distance.
Sure. It's not concept. It's actually involved in the day-to-day. Yeah.
Yep.
Anything you do differently in hindsight from your very long tenure at this role?
Oh man, I mean, so many things. Every time you figure something out, you're like, I wish I'd done that sooner.
I'm specifically curious, digital. If you were starting all over, did you immediately bring your email program in-house? Did you immediately prioritize digital? Were there things that you should have done sooner, or things that you shouldn't have done at all, or done, rolled it out and stuck with your agency for another year while you brought the team in? I'm just kind of curious. I want to know what people can learn from your experience, because you built something very impressive. And there's only one of you, but there's 50 state parties and a whole lot of down ballot parties. What can they learn from your experience? And if you don't have a good answer, that's fine too. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I think I'm pleased with it. Well, I think I probably would have earlier had kind of tone reset conversations with our consultant. Once we did, it was great. And we're really see eye to eye. We still have a bigger digital staff than most, probably any state party in the country, but it's smaller now than it was before. And we're working with some of the same.
When you say now, you mean post 2024, or what do you mean?
Post 2025. This
after April. Okay, yeah. So you stayed big through April, because I wasn't sure if when do you downsize? After the April election? It's always so hard having those nonpartisan elections so shortly thereafter.
At this moment, including part-time folks, we have 59 staff at WisDems overall.
59.
So, yeah. So most state parties have less than 5. So we're it's just in a totally different place, and that is yet smaller than I think we had 80 at the beginning of this year through the spring election. That is still a reduction, and it's. I don't think we've dipped below 50 since I staffed up after since the probably late fall or beginning of 2020. I was elected in June of 2019, and it was already one of maybe the biggest state party in the country. My predecessor,
it was a large party for sure.
Yeah, it was 23, I think, and that's because what drew me to run for this job was that my predecessor created a year-round organizing program that I just fell in love with, and that my this sort of approach of engaging with people on a year-round basis, of using the time far from an election to reach out to people that you don't have any relationship with yet, who might not be Democrats at all, that, and building your electorate, and learning what people care about, so you can really connect with them about those issues. All of that stuff was great, and that was in the DNA that drew me to run for the party. That Martha Lanning, before her Mike Tate, there's been a long build, and then when I came in, a lot of what I felt like I could add was on the communications and digital side, and we've supercharged the organizing pieces and done much more online to offline organizing as well. So now we work with thousands of volunteers outside Wisconsin that we interact with online to be able to pull them into phone making and helping recruit. We even have out-of-state volunteers call to confirm door knocking shifts from people who are in-state. There's all kinds of ways you can knit all these pieces together. But if I could go back, I think thinking through. There's so much growth that people can do when they know where you're trying to go. And I think there were some changes that I felt like I couldn't really try to do until we had kind of Bobak on board. And in retrospect, I think engaging more with Chuck and with our consultants on some of those pieces up front, we probably could have moved more quickly to get the kind of cultural principles of it right. And I mean, Chuck has moved forward a ton, and different folks have. Sure. Yeah. Thinking back, I think that we tried to beat the drum on Twitter for a while after it wasn't working, and probably overinvested for a while in the kind of end of month thread as an institution, even though it wasn't actually generating much money. And I think discovered that like people were reaching out to Amplify had like abandoned Twitter, and like there was just like it took a while to realize exactly how catastrophic the Muskoverse was for that platform.
Interesting.
I don't feel like we've done a fair amount of stuff on vertical video as a party, but we haven't crushed it. And I think figuring like being a little bit more creative and tapping more people to figure out how we could really blow up, I think would have been valuable. We've not taken YouTube seriously, and YouTube is such a striking platform, and I think you need a strategy that has a theory.
That's what that needs its own strategy for sure. You cannot I mean, shorts, you can repost things from TikTok and Reels to shorts, that's fine, but that is not a strategy. Like TikTok or YouTube, of all of the platforms, I think if you're going to take it seriously, really needs like a true investment that like cannot just be like, oh, let's just put an hour in on the side of all the other stuff. YouTube is a beast, but so much opportunity for the folks that are like figuring out how to make it work.
Yeah, I had this is more a TikTok thing, but I had a long conversation with Jeff Jackson about how he does his videos. And he spends so much time. He spends like a whole weekend, basically. It's like 18 hours
for that 90-second shot in the kitchen.
And then it reaches millions of people. And like, there's enormous returns to effort. And I don't think we were ever in a world where we were going to do it exactly like that. But I do think, I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if there were some untapped opportunities that we didn't capture because we didn't lean into those particular bits.
I mean, I think that's super helpful for folks to think about too. Like they're struggling on Twitter. Well, like, and not everybody's going to ever like Jeff Jackson obviously is comfortable on camera. He's confident. He's very good at what he does. He's also phenomenal on Substack, as I'm sure you know. But like, I think parties who are like struggling with short form, written content, like if they want to look at video, and again, I think YouTube's like a whole different beast. Like if you don't have somebody who understands YouTube, you're never gonna like do that. But like short form video, you don't have to be amazing at short form video to like get started and see some growth on TikTok and like lean in. So I think that's like that's a helpful place. I
think the most important thing in a way, like I am pleased with not having spent a huge amount of time or money on stuff that didn't produce. Like I think we spent too long on doing as much on Twitter as we did. But I think a trap that groups can fall into is feeling like they have to post. They have to post on different places. They have to like have some presence, and they have like 2,000 followers, and it's not really doing anything for them. And there's not a strategic objective they're meeting. And I feel like we've always been pretty good at like remembering that Twitter helped us fundraise. Twitter helped us amplify things for press. Twitter is not where the voters were. Like just like talking about why Trump was bad on Twitter was like not gonna mean something. A lot of the approach that we have to how we use these platforms is to actually like explain something that people might not know, or give a perspective that people don't have already, or lay out a strategy for why something matters. And like I think that's something that is good. And so I think, and in some ways it does, if there's a particular medium that you can really crush, I think that's a great thing to do, So I do think at the same time as I wish we'd figured out how to like totally blow up in some of these other platforms, I am pleased that we developed a really, really strong game on a few platforms in a way that has actually broken through and moved the needle for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Who or what was your biggest adversary during your tenure? Was it Elon Musk, local Republicans, Facebook algorithms, something else altogether? Who do you look back on as you're that white whale of your time?
It's Robin Voss.
Robin Voss. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, and Ron Johnson. I guess
Speaker of the House of Wisconsin, has ruled Wisconsin with an iron fist for over a decade until recently, and still very powerful. Just for those who don't live in Wisconsin, don't know who that is.
So 2018, Governor Evers wins. Democrats sweep every statewide race for the first time since 1982. Immediately, Scott Walker calls a special session of the legislature. They pass a lame duck power grab, like a suite of bills to claw power back from the governor and attorney general. Robin Voss, sends those to Scott Walker's desk. They get signed. 2020 cycle rolls in. There was a period where the polling was completely out of whack. Like it was telling us. I did a retrospective analysis, and like they were 11 points too optimistic, the average state legislative poll.
Wow.
And that was where people thought that Biden was crushing Trump, and then Trump won. It was even worse at the state legislative level. And there's a lot of like, it seems like non-response bias was the biggest source of that a lot of like Democrats were extremely excited about talking to pollsters, and reverse was not the case. It seemed like we had polls that had us within the margin of error of defeating Robin Voss. And so the Democratic Party and allied groups and all these people like poured in like more than $1 million to try to beat Robin Voss in his own district, and he wound up winning very soundly.
That was against Joel, right?
That was yep.
Yeah, I remember that race. I remember there was good vibes, and then the end result was exactly what you would have expected if you hadn't seen any of the polling. Yeah.
So we had like this dual strategy that cycle of by the end of our original plan was called Save the Veto. Cassie Finelli, who's the just legendary, amazing campaign operative, ran Governor Evers' reelect, and then just ran Susan Crawford's campaign. She was running the Save the Veto campaign, which was preventing Republican supermajorities. And they had like a handful of targeted seats that we went hell for leather in, and wound up actually like gaining seats in the state assembly. And that was extremely successful. One of the most, someone told us that was the most successful state legislative program in the country that cycle. I don't know if that's actually the case, but like certainly like hit all of its goals.
Right. Okay.
Then there was this like wave of polling that was like, all these seats are up for grabs. And we had this like tons of funding had come in through the Princess Bride event and these other digital events. And we're like, let's just go for it. And Cassie was like, Ben, I don't think this polling is real. And I was like, but what if it is? So she's learned how right she was, but we, poured money in and wound up the kind of expansion seats wound up not actually, being in play in retrospect, just as we didn't think it was that they would be. Voss responded to that by like doubling down and hyper gerrymandering the state again in 2022, and has just been just such a disaster for our state. Mississippi expanded Medicaid, Wisconsin didn't. Like Wisconsin is to the right of so many states in our policies because of Voss fundamentally. And the state Senate isn't even as extreme as him, even though some of its members are more extreme than is his caucus. And I think this 2026 could be the year that he ends his reign of terror as the majority leader of the Wisconsin State Assembly. But he's not a household name to the whole country, but his pernicious influence on Wisconsin has been constant.
Yeah.
Ron Johnson
he is a household name to Wisconsin, but I don't know I don't know about nationally if folks know him, but here in Wisconsin, he is the boogeyman for a lot of folks with good reason, for sure. I mean, you mentioned his name on TikTok and people go nuts, like how much they hate him. So with good reason. So
Ron Johnson is an embarrassingly bad senator and is a disaster. I could talk for another hour about him. He is less present day to day in like twisting and distorting and just making Wisconsin.
He lives in Florida, But no, I agree with that. He spends a lot of time on talk radio, but and he's doing terrible things in DC. But Robin Voss is doing real actionable, he is making real actionable decisions that are dismantling Wisconsin's democracy. Until recently, we didn't have fair maps, but also like you said, Badger Care expansion, things like that. I mean, yeah, that guy. So
this is a new thing.
He loves them. He loves those. Yep.
Take the keys from that guy. That's his son. Yep.
And 2026 is going to happen. So, while I won't ask you to endorse your successor, where do you hope to see the party go from here? You mentioned short form video, I guess digital and in general, obviously flipping the legislature in 2026 is certainly something I'm already working towards. I know you'll continue working towards it regardless of what you do beyond this role. Is there anything that you're excited to see in the future, or y'all built something great and you're excited to see where it goes from here?
I think there's a ton of innovation to do. And I think the biggest area that I hope that next year is able to carry forward is thinking about especially how to communicate with young people broadly, and in particular young men across race and ethnicity, but really both, and thinking about how to move more into cultural spaces, thinking about people spend a lot of time in video games and spend a lot of time in podcasts and long form stuff. And we I'm here with you in a long form format, but thinking through how to get to voters, both as a party and also supporting candidates to get to those voters who are just totally tuned out of traditional media, I think is really critical. I think we've gotten really good at a lot of the kind of traditional online work, if that makes sense to say traditional online work, and traditional media. I think we're able to help push news cycles to reflect more accurately what's actually happening in the state. But there's still a lot of people who get their news from online spaces that we don't have much presence in. And I think really innovating on how to crack that nut could make a big difference, both for the short term and for the long term. I think 2026 is shaping up to look pretty good for us, and we need to push that as far as we can so we actually ideally get majorities with even a little breathing room in our state legislature and flip House seats, including that might look particularly tough right now. But then the big kahuna is 2028, and that presidential electorates are just so much bigger, and the people who pay the least attention to politics are the most likely to vote in a presidential setting specifically. And so figuring out how to reach people who do not pay attention to politics is a 4-year project that we just need to become incredibly good at. And that's I feel like the next frontier, finding new ways to drive even further. When I look at 24, it was so painful that Trump won, but I'm proud that the rest of the country, the vast majority of states, Democratic turnout fell while Republican turnout rose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was persuasion. Some of that was turnout. In Wisconsin, we were one of the very few states where Republican turnout shot up, but Democratic turnout rose too. Harris got more votes than Biden. We were able to reach people who had not tuned in 2020 when we had explosively high turnout, and find more Democrats to turn out in 2024, which is why it felt so good. The vibes felt so amazing. It's just that the people who voted for Trump and hadn't voted for a very long time or never, they weren't talking to us. So I think we're building on some strength, and that high turnout on the Democratic side, we held those voters. They voted for Tammy Baldwin. They voted down ballot in a ton of cases. Rebecca Cook in the 3rd congressional district was 5 points ahead of the top of the ticket. But not only was she within 3 points of winning, she also did 5 points better than Harris.
Right.
So Republicans had down ballot problems. They, we won these very close state Senate seats. We swept all 4 competitive state Senate districts because we were able to have that strength on ballot. But Trump personally was able to reach disengaged voters who only voted for him. That's how he won while Eric Hovde lost. It wasn't because Baldwin dramatically overperformed Harris. They had almost the same number of votes. It's that 54,000 people voted for Trump and then stopped voting.
Yeah.
But we've got to learn. I think we have something to learn from Trump about communicating with people who tune politics out. I think that we made fun of the McDonald's stunt and the garbage truck stunt, but that was visual communication that you make sense when you're in a bar and the sound is turned off on the TV, or you just are seeing things zooming around on social media that people barely pay attention to. So often you have to not only have the sound on, but you have to listen for a couple paragraphs to understand what it is Democrats are trying to say.
Right.
And I think, in that sense, both hyper short form visual and long form personal that gets outside of talking points are both frontiers that we have to figure out how to do better on as Democrats.
Cool. So on that note, you came very close to becoming DNC chair. Anything you would be doing differently right now from a digital perspective that you would like to see the party doing?
I think the DNC should be a content factory. So this is if I'd won the DNC chair election, then on the Monday after, we would have started daily press conferences. And to me, the vision for that is you have a press conference where you have people telling real people's their actual stories, and you do a lot of work to curate those stories and bring them from across the country. You talk about what Republicans are doing wrong in bits that can be, torn up and put out as on different platforms of social media pieces. You pick a lot of fights. You go after specific Republican legislators that are going along with terrible things that Trump is doing, and have a bunch of different voices in the mix. But I think, in a sense, Trump turns politics into a show, but we're not a character in that show unless we're showing up in every episode. And so I think just the volume of communication is, I think, the biggest thing that I've spoken to Ken Martin about this. I think that my hope is the DNC kind of moves in this direction. They've hired a war room team, and they're kind of leaning in more. I think they've done a really beautiful revamp of their kind of voice on social media and how they're approaching accent.
Oh yeah, they brought New Jersey to national. That's literally what's happening, and I'm there. I'm so there for it. Yeah.
Yes. That's the right move.
I totally agree. If you want to do well on Twitter and you're not going to be snarky, you're in this day and age, why are you on Twitter? There's just no point to being there. So I love the rebrand on Twitter for sure.
Yes. But I think ramping up the volume is the key. Is you should try lots of stuff. You should be really present, and you should have lots of voices and actual human beings' faces, as well as kind of institutional voices. And I think, people generally respond more to people than they do to brands or institutions or entities. And so you need to introduce actual recurring characters. And that's I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to actually have people who've been showrunners who help think about how to produce that show, and have plot lines that unfold over time, and pick fights where Republicans are responding to Democrats and to the Democratic Party. You want to punch up, you want to punch bullies, but the public really attention gets drawn to those kinds of fights especially when there's a really clear hero and clear villain. And Trump has created such a huge surface area of villainy, and there's so many people in his administration and in in both chambers of the Congress that have that kind of villainous aspect. So I think it is. I think there's just a lot of opportunity there, and my hope is that we seize more and more of it in the years to come.
I love that. I hosted an episode a couple weeks back with Micha Sifri, and we were talking about what Democrats can do differently. And we were talking about this idea of like a daily press briefer, like response. And he said, like how many people are really going to watch that? I was like, it doesn't matter. You do it every day. And then you take those clips and you put them on TikTok and you let Courier run with it. You let Midas Touch run with it. And you will reach more people than CNN every single day with those moments, with those stories. The idea of actually using like Hollywood showrunners, I mean, that's brilliant. Like, why aren't we doing that? We have access to all those people. They're all on board. Like, we've got the talent of Hollywood that's like excited about this. Like, yeah, why don't we? Like, Donald Trump is so good at it while being so terrible. Like, we certainly could match that if we were like, we just have to think about things differently. So I love that concept. And I would, every day that I don't see it happening, I'm frustrated, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So I don't know what the future looks like, but I think that's a good laying out of what we could be doing today that we're not. So I'm not going to ask you what's next, but Crooked Media floated you as a potential 2028 contender. Any chance you're running for president?
No, I can categorically rule that out.
Damn it. I was hoping for I was hoping for a scoop. How can folks keep in touch with you moving forward?
You can subscribe to my, go to benwikler.com. You can sign up for my Substack. You can follow me on Blue Sky. And you can follow me on all the platforms. Everywhere. I'm just Ben Wikler, benwikler.com, Wikler, no N, no C. I'm working on a book proposal, so I might be writing a book. And want to try to, I think the story of Wisconsin and how we've fought back against, an attempt to basically fully rig our democracy can offer a lot to what we need to do nationwide. And so I want to try to tell that story and then equip people with how to do battle in this, dark moment in American history. But a moment with promise.
I will read that book, but I will also read Lies and the Lying Liars Part 2 if you decide to write that instead. So,
thanks on both counts.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all the work you've done and for coming on and having a chat.
It's a pleasure. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
That does it for another episode of Hello Merge Tag. Thanks so much for listening. Know anyone who might appreciate this podcast? Please share it with them today. Find all episodes at hellomergetag.com or wherever you stream podcasts. Have questions or want to connect? Drop us a line at hello@reverbalcommunications.com. Until next time, keep on telling your story.